Hey folks, in this video I'm going to talk about digital nomads and their impact on communities and impact on travel opportunities. It's based on this article that I found, which is from lonelyplanet.com, and it's an opinion piece on why I believe digital nomads are ruining travel. Okay, so let's dig into it. There's a lot to unpack here. So basically she's describing the places that she went previously, traveling around, you know, rich cultural traditions, so on and so forth, and all of that stuff. But how technology and globalization have spurred massive development in countries all around the globe, and digital nomads are moving in. And using phrases like the cheapening of entire cultures. Well, basically, my story is a little bit different. I've been location independent since 2013, and I have the place that I live, Belgrade, Serbia, which I chose for its culture. And I chose you know, rather because I actually wanted to be a part of this culture and I wanted to live here. So I'd say I'm an example of somebody who doesn't want to cheapen the culture, but actually wants to enrich themselves with the culture. So let's go on and, basically, this is something that's going to be more and more a thing as the numbers of us increase. So entrepreneurs flock to the serene beaches of Bali, Mexico, and Thailand to create their new home away from home. Yep, I'm one of those people, and ended up changing the fabric of entire communities. I'm not really sure that's true because the places where us digital nomads hang out at this point are just like small areas. And if you go a few blocks, a few kilometers, a few towns over, there's always people living as they always have, without speaking English, without serving vegan food. You know, I think this article is overblown a bit. But that doesn't mean that this might not be the case 2 or 3 years from now. But anyway, the allure of travel, blah 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 blah. I mean, there's kind of two arguments here. One is that local cultures are being destroyed, and then the other is that the experience of Western travelers is being destroyed because digital nomads are becoming more popular as a form of Western traveler, rather than Australians going to the beach to drink beer. Which, okay, here's the thing, folks. If you're talking about Latin America or anything like that, the Americas in general, the first argument of destroying local culture, let's put it on Mr. Columbus, Christopher Columbus, going and discovering America. That's when this started. And ever since then, there's been many iterations of the same thing: Western culture going into a place and changing it. And you also have to account for the fact that before Western culture got to different places around the world, there were other cultures neighboring it who were also changing, conquering. There's always a natural cultural exchange. But in this 21st century, I guess what's interesting is that we, with our money from the West, are now able to go and operate and plant ourselves in a place and have a pretty much unlimited supply of income, meaning that you don't have to go back to the West to work again. And then, I did that for a few years when I was getting going from 2008 to 2011, where I would go to Canada, make a bunch of money, go back to Serbia, spend a bunch of money. 3 months go by and I would do the whole thing again, like 3 months in Serbia, 3 months in Canada. And, I will say that compared to the lifestyle that I'm living now, when I was in Serbia from 2008 to 2011, I was living a much more authentic Serbian experience. There were also minuses to that. You know, it was not fully ideal in the way that, well, I would have had to teach English or something to make a living if I didn't then manage to succeed in making stable remote work for myself. What I was trying to achieve with my stable remote work was taking the best of both worlds. Canada is good for pleasure, good for business. Canada is good for business, bad for pleasure. Serbia is bad for business, good for pleasure. I want to combine the two. And it's ideal. It's an ideal. Am I experiencing less of Serbian culture now that I'm sitting at a desk in my apartment? A lot of the time working and talking with clients and people in English speaking countries. Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely true. But overall, has it made my life in Serbia better? Yes, remote working has. And have I been able to make other people's lives in Serbia better by bringing this sort of stability? Yes, I have. So I think with my approach, I always was involved with local people, learning the local language, and really enriching myself with the local culture. And this is something that you see in this article. She's talking about how digital nomads have changed travel, right? Well, travelers don't often get as deep as I have been able to get into Serbian culture for the last 13 years, basically. It's not it's not possible to go to a place for 2 weeks and take the gringo tour where you're herded up Machu Picchu with a bunch of other gringos and actually get a real taste for the culture. So I would argue that digital nomadism offers the opportunity to create a bridge between the cultures, right? A bridge between like I've created between Western culture, Canadian culture, and Serbian culture, and in a way that when my grandparents moved from Slovakia and Austria to Canada, they weren't able to create that bridge of culture. They just immigrated, and that was it. That was in the 50s. And basically, now we have this ability to create this sort of hybrid culture where I can take the best things of Canada, which is definitely work culture, um, ways of doing business, the economy, and I can bring that here. And the people who are here in Serbia and want to be able to be tapped into that, I'm here. We can meet. We can discuss. I'm bringing those ideas. I'm bringing that income. I'm bringing those opportunities here. And in being a local business that caters to someone like me, you can get some of that income. And if you are someone from Serbia, for example, who wants to learn about the Western ways of doing business, working in English, you've got people who you can hang out with here who are fully versed in that. Now, previously, as I mentioned with my family from Slovakia and Austria, basically you had to move to the other country. And if you look at to take advantage of the opportunities of those other cultures. So if you look at Serbia, for example, a lot of people still want to leave this place and move to the West. The digital nomad movement offers them an opportunity where they don't have to leave the country to essentially economically tap into new opportunities. So it's not just an opportunity for people from the West to move to another country and set up shop there. It's also an opportunity for people to stay in their own country and become a part of the Western business ecosystem. And that's one thing this article doesn't touch on. Now, does it destroy local culture? Um, yeah, I mean, the more and more you have people from the West moving to other places, the more and more they're going to want their conveniences, their Starbucks, their shopping malls, etc., etc., etc. I'm guilty of this sort of, let's call it, wanting North American culture, for example. But it was happening long before the digital nomad movement. That's what you don't understand. Back in 2011 or 12, I wrote a song called Republic of Suburbia, which was about the increasing Americanization of Serbia, the shopping malls and the way of life. So people wanted this. People in these countries, Eastern Europe especially, wanted to be Americanized long before digital nomads started showing up. And a lot of the population, the middle class, wanted that to happen. And, they view it as progress. So it's not like digital nomads are the sole force of this destroying of the local culture. I mean, As I said, in Latin America, this can be attributed to Columbus initially, right? And every single wave of people, travelers, is accused of this exact same thing, right? Because I remember in 2003 when I started traveling Europe solo, it was obvious that British tourists were ruining Prague. It was outrageous. They were ruining Prague. Guess what? It's 18 years later, and there's still a city called Prague, and there's still Czech people that live there, and they still have their culture. I lived there in 2008 for a bit, and you know, that impression that I had in 2003 was from being in the city center of Prague. In 2008, I actually was getting certified to be an English teacher because I wanted it as a backup plan. And then I was living in an actual neighborhood of Prague where it was only locals. We were the only foreigners, the English teaching, the people who are training to be English teachers. All right. So if you look under a microscope at, like, the city center of these digital nomad hotspots, what you see might actually worry you, that the local culture is being pushed out. But walk like 5 or 10 blocks out, walk 2 kilometers, 2 metro stations out, and you will see pretty much only local culture. And yes, that local culture is on a global scale being more Americanized, whether it's in China, whether it's in Turkey, whether it's in Mexico. But that's what the people want, and it's development. If you view American culture as the lowest common denominator of culture, meaning that it's all about commerce and capitalism, that's where a lot of cultures need to go on their sort of like development. A lot of these places are still very poor. And what the American capitalist system does offer is a certain amount of development. All of the supermarkets, insurance companies, and all this stuff. Following that model actually brings your society closer to stability. This is what you've seen in the countries of Central Eastern Europe that have joined the European Union and adopted these systems, and they get richer. And that's what people want. People want the opportunity for a normal life. So having digital nomads actually create that bridge of culture, of international companies. It gives the people what they want. So I think that the person who wrote this article did not actually go and interview any locals in these places to say, hey, what do you think of these digital nomads? And I don't really think that the argument that ruining travel for people who want to go, you can still go to Machu Picchu, and it's just as much as a gringo cash grab as it was in 2009 when I went to Peru. I've always been allergic to that sort of stuff. it's I always wanted to go into the local neighborhoods, walk around, see the local culture, feel the vibes, meet some people, and get off on the energy of a place, and also stay in hostels and stuff and meet other gringos. I was always like that. I was never into this sort of like go and see the museum sort of tourism that a lot of travelers like. And I was not ever really into that sort of like resort sort of go to Mexico and stay in a hotel that's got a bunch of gringos and just party on the beach sort of tourism. I was always into checking out local neighborhoods, and that's how I ended up living in Serbia. And a lot of us digital nomads are of that mindset, that we want a local experience much more than the people who go for 2 weeks to Peru or Latin America and want to see Machu Picchu. I keep on saying this. We're more in it for the long term. We're more interested in how living in another country can change us. It just happens to be that we choose Western income and working online as the way that we're going to make the long term possible. Different cultures are accessible in different amounts. That's for sure. And different digital nomads are receptive to the local culture in different proportions. So I was very interested in, Serbian culture and all that stuff, and I moved here and, you know, started learning the language as soon as I moved here. And it's a very accessible culture, even if you just speak English and not Serbian. Lots of people speak English and are very interested in explaining the culture and history of this place to you. And that's a very good thing. Did I learn as much about Thai culture in my time in Thailand? No, because the language is completely different, and very few people speak English to the point where they can have conversations where they explain their culture and history to you. And, I blend in much more in Serbia with my, genetics and facial features than I did in Thailand, obviously. Um, I mean, yeah, my background is, from 500 kilometers up the river from here. So, you know, I look more like the people here than I look like the Thai people. And so, yeah, places like Thailand and Bali and Tulum, Mexico, I get it. There's a whole swarm of digital nomads going there, and they're essentially wanting to live there exactly as they did in their home country and just want to take advantage of, you know, cheaper prices and better weather. I get that how that's a damaging thing. And yeah, it's going to happen. And it's just a consequence of a lot of things. But it's no different than the British people who went to Prague in 2003, or when was the first time I went there? 1996 with my dad. I was 13. Yeah, I mean, it just it's going to be the same thing over and over again. Tour- Tourists judging other tourists for going and ruining a culture. But I think you'll find that cultures ruin themselves. That the Westernization of the world is not so much. How do I explain it? The cultures that are being Westernized want it, and if the and in a lot of places the locals that want to keep on living the traditional way keep on doing that, but the Western ways that come in are often improving life. Western medicine improves life in a lot of cases. Western technology, like automobiles and stuff like that, improve life. And you could say that it's a shame that people in Thailand have cars, but I don't think that they would think that. And the whole thing is so done that it's not even an argument whether they should go back to using horses. And in terms of cuisine and stuff like that, so the end result of the digital nomad movement is going to be longer term travelers who are going to form longer term relationships with locals, have children with locals, as a lot of expats do, and create a new generation of people who are global citizens who have never left their country, but are global citizens from hanging out with the global citizens of the digital nomad movement who end up living in their country. And you're going to have a very interesting world based on that. And it's going to be more international. Wealth is going to be spread out a lot more. Yes, are going to be some places where the locals are priced out of certain neighborhoods and stuff like that. But there are anyway, because, in most of these developing countries, there's a huge wealth gap. And normally, us digital nomads, we're going into these neighborhoods where the rich people live already in these countries. Like, the rich people already have moved in, and to our taste, since the rich people in Thailand or China or Mexico, upper middle class and above, they naturally have a lot more in common with us gringo travelers that end up there. And so we gravitate to those neighborhoods because they do have a lot of the things like the Starbucks coffee and the shopping malls that make us feel comfortable and like home, and find that nice middle ground between being in a foreign country and being in an environment that has the Western conveniences that we like. So we will move into those upper middle class neighborhoods by default, and those neighborhoods do actually already exist in places like Bangkok, Mexico City, Belgrade, so on and so forth. And we're not so much going into the poor working class neighborhoods and setting up shop there as digital nomads. We're pretty much leaving those places alone and the people there to do their thing for now, pretty much. And gentrification is something that happens neighborhood by by neighborhood. And it was a thing in Toronto. You know, in the last 20 years, I watched neighborhoods like, for example, the East End of Toronto get gentrified. Now, you can move from Toronto to Eastern Europe and be part of the gentrification of that, along with the local population of countries like Poland, for example, that are becoming more integrated and into the European economy, and thus more wealth, and people coming back from living in England, wanting the conveniences that they had there. They're still Polish, but they've seen something else, and they move back, and they want to live in a neighborhood that has more modernism and all that stuff. So it's all just development. It's all just sort of like what happens. I mean, yeah, it's not all on travelers. And what I would say, if you are a digital nomad and you want to be a part of what's going to be positive about this movement, go to these places and find those kids who can converse with you in English or learn their language and make and find the people in that society who can most come to you and be willing to go to them and create a cultural bridge with them of understanding, learn about their culture, learn about their traditions, history, and all that's and language and all that sort of stuff. And then you be there long term and be the person who's helping them adjust to the Western economy that they now have the opportunity to be a part of. You know, I started my business here in Serbia, and the door has always been open for local people who want to learn about IT support, for example, and better their lives working with the English speaking world. So that's it, folks. And yeah, is digital nomadism going to ruin a certain type of travel? In certain places, yeah, but there's still always going to be, if you go to Tulum, yeah, but yeah, there's always going to be 100 other places, villages in Mexico where there's still like you'll be the only foreigner. People still live traditionally. But if you go to the major centers, business cities, capitals, all that stuff, you will find digital nomads mixing with the locals who do want to be a part of the gentrification as well. So I think the whole problem is a little bit overblown in this article, and we who want to be long-term expats living in a place as digital nomads, or long-term digital nomads going from place to place, we should focus on creating those cultural bridges that allow people from those countries to benefit from us being there rather than just eating in local restaurants and renting from local landlords. We should also connect with the local people and share ideas and opportunities with them. And yeah, for the gringo travelers who just want to go to a place for 2 weeks and go on some adventures, you still can. Just realize that if you go to the digital nomad hotspots, we're going to be there, and we're going to have as snobby an attitude towards you as you have towards us. If you're just an Australian flying into Bali for 2 weeks to drink beer on the beach, us who have been there for 2 months and have learned a bit about the local food and culture are going to have a different vibe and program and different priorities if we're working every day while we're there. So it's a brave new world. You can't stop the change that's occurring with digital nomads around the world. It's not going to be possible. So you need to embrace it and make sure that you're a conscious digital nomad that's giving back to the communities that you find yourself in somehow. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll catch you later.